What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, wanted to make a quick video before the game on Saturday night, talking about some players that we're looking at and watching very closely Saturday night. This second game, some guys had some good practices, some guys had some performances from the last week that we really want to try to take a look at and see if we can find out more. First things first, the player that's obvious, and that's Anthony Richardson. How does he respond from having a good game on last Saturday, maybe getting some more reps than what he did before? I don't know, but how does he handle a different kind of defense, different players? How does that work for him? That's the most important one. How does he cap off what was a very interesting week against the Chicago Bears? Other things that we could talk about, young running backs. With Jonathan Taylor still being away from the team and Zach Moss still dealing with injury, who is going to, pick it up, right? We remember that Deion Jackson had 6 carries for 35 yards in the last game against Buffalo. Is there anyone else that's going to step up and show that they got what it takes to make it on the back end of this roster? We're going to have to see and figure that out. So does Evan Hall do some more damage? Things of that nature. Does he run better? Josh Downs is another one. Josh Downs has been lighting it up over the last couple weeks here for the Indianapolis Colts. Really has been showing a lot of promise. And does he provide another spark in Saturday's game? I know he had 2 catches for 29 yards in the game against Buffalo. Does he have another successful outing for Indianapolis in that game? Alec Pierce is another one. Again, we saw what happened last week. He had the drop, the big one. How does he respond? Does he get another big one his way? And how does he respond with everything else that goes on? We see him in practice. He's dominating people. Does he continue to do that same thing in the games? That's going to be the important stuff. Another couple names that we can talk about. The backup offensive line. When you're talking about what happened last week, it's safe to say, even during joint practices this week, everyone was talking about the backup offensive linemen, how bad they looked throughout the whole week. Because we have virtually no depth and we have virtually no guys with any real experience. So how do they respond to backups on the defensive line for the Bears? How do they respond to that? It has to get better, because if it doesn't, again, we could be in a world of pain when it comes to those guys. Young corners. We go to the defensive side now. Young corners that we can talk about. That's about Brents, Rush, and Jones. Do those guys make any plays? Right? Because the big one has always been about these young corners. How are they going to respond, especially with, some of the good wide receivers now that Chicago does have? DJ Moore being out there, a couple other guys, Chase Claypool, a few other guys that are going in there. How do they respond to this new wide receiver corps, and do they get better from the last week? Because Darrell Baker's been the guy that's been taken over. Who on the young nucleus of corners that you drafted is going to start taking advantage of their opportunities? We know Darius Rush did it last week. Does he do the same this week, or does Brents or Jones take over and show something that we haven't seen yet? And I think the last player that we can talk about, and that's Nick Cross. Nick Cross, who has been having a phenomenal training camp, had 3 interceptions in the 2 joint practices against the Chicago Bears. You got to wonder, is he going to get more reps, and is he going to show more game time ability? Because remember, we saw him in training camp last year have quite a few good practices, but it never translated to much. Does he have a better opportunity this time around to go into it and get better snaps? But I think that's really going to do it, guys. I don't think there's a lot more other players that we can really talk about. They covered virtually everything. I talked about the quarterback, We talked about the young running backs. We talked about a couple of the young wide receivers that we have. We talked about the backup offensive line. Talked about young corners and secondary guys. Really, I don't know how much more we can go into it, but let me know your guys' thoughts. Is there any players that you're looking at before Saturday's game that you're really wanting to see take advantage of this? But if you haven't made it this far, guys, make sure you tune in to the live play-by-play reaction. I will be doing that Saturday night for the game. Make sure you all are there tuning into that because that is going to be a fun one. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Greatly appreciate all the support. And as always, go Colts.